Well, the latest edition of the Retro Critical podcast has just been released, and I felt I really neglected something, and that's talking about Pokemon Go. So, throwing a little bonus segment out here for you guys, both on iTunes and elsewhere, and on YouTube. And this really hit me because after I finished up recording most of the last episode, I got a couple questions about Pokemon Go from my mother and my girlfriend. Now, my girlfriend knows that obviously I'm into video games, but my parents really, they don't play games. They're much older. They never talk about video games at all. So the fact that I was getting questions about Pokemon Go from two sources kind of showed me that I neglected what a phenomenon this is. And I didn't read much about it. I haven't downloaded it. I haven't played it. I'm not a huge Pokemon fan. If you've been following the podcast and the channel, you'll know that I play the Pokemon games essentially to relax when a new one is released. I just kind of like them as old school JRPGs, but I never really had a connection to the series, nor did I have any desire to kind of go out, I guess, around my neighborhood and try to capture Pokemon. So I kind of just left it on the periphery of my attention, had no reason to pay that much attention to it. But as I've seen the stories come out, and it's obviously reached a kind of level where people who don't pay attention to video games at all are talking about it, I looked into it, and I'm going to make a comparison here to Miitomo and to Nintendo's business strategy for their mobile division in general. I think it's strikingly odd that Nintendo has produced obviously in conjunction with whatever other studios they're working with Pokemon Go. I think it's Niantic. That's how it's pronounced. But I find it strange that their first two efforts on mobile devices are games that do a shockingly thorough job of compromising your privacy. Now, I came out and I criticized Miitomo because I thought of all the franchises Nintendo could have gone with to step in to the mobile market, they chose an odd social networking tool, the hallmark feature of which was to ask you incredibly personal questions. Questions that, to me, felt like a kind of interrogation. And I made sort of a gag video that I was a Stasi officer kind of playing this game in East Germany. I don't think anyone particularly found that as funny as I did, but I had the sense that an oppressive regime could only dream of something like Miitomo, a pocket avatar that asks you questions, or you respond to questions so that your avatar can tell them to your friends. And think about the early round of questions that you were getting. I only played Miitomo for one weekend, and it was asking me things like, what makes me feel sad? What would I do on my ideal date? What commercial have I laughed at the most in the past 2 weeks? What's my favorite food? So coming up with essentially a dossier of information about me, and it was unclear to me, okay, so I answer these questions, I get some candy, and I go play their version of Pachinko. I felt like it was a very kind of flimsy veil for this fairly expansive data collection system that they had built into the app. And I wound up deleting Miitomo. Now we fast forward to Pokemon Go, and Al Franken, the former SNL writer, and I guess he's a senator from Minnesota, asked some questions, 7 questions about privacy concerns to this developer in San Francisco that Nintendo worked with in creating Miitomo. And he brings up some good points. And of course, if you scroll around the internet, you'll see exactly what Pokemon Go collects, and it collects a shocking amount of information. I mean, we had the stories that someone came upon a dead body. I don't know if that's true or not, but I heard that floating around. The story about people who were robbed, and I'm going to say I don't know how this game works, but essentially people were, through the app, were led to have a Pokemon battle somewhere, and they were robbed at gunpoint. Again, I'm seeing these floating around on the internet on sites like Kotaku, so take that for what it's worth. But we've had these stories proliferating. But here's some of the... there's an article that I'm going to link to. What website is this? BuzzFeed. And it talks about the different things that are in the EULA. It says it can tell a lot about your movement based on your play, where you go, when you went, how you got there, how long you stayed, and who else was there. Niantic may collect, amongst other things, your email address, IP address, the web page you're using before logging into the app, your username, and your location. And then, of course, there was this bug where I guess if you signed in through Google on an iOS device, Pokemon Go would actually take over, or could take over your Google account and have read and write access to everything on your Google Drive, including Gmail, and you can see how that would be of interest to a hacker. Then it says that Pokemon Go will share information with other parties, such as third-party service providers and third parties who conduct research and analysis. This is a quote: research and analysis, demographic profiling, and other purposes. It also says the policy allows, per the policy, Pokemon Go may also share information that it collects with law enforcement in response to legal claims to protect its own interests or to stop, quote, illegal, unethical, or legally questionable action. Now, very broad language for a program that collects so much data about yourself. Now, people are out there probably saying, oh, well, all the apps collect this. Any app that you use, this is not a story. Well, I think it is for a couple reasons. Basic point, number one, just because other apps collect all this information doesn't mean that that's a good thing. It doesn't mean that you should knowingly compromise your privacy like this. And if you don't believe how serious this is, there are any number of online sources that will actually walk you through how your privacy can be compromised using a cell phone. And the best, kind of most recent example I saw is Vice News Report. They do this show on HBO. This is one from maybe this winter, early spring. And they show you exactly how you can hack someone's phone and the level of data that can be collected. So that's the minor point. Yes, other apps do this, but it is not desirable for so many reasons. And number two, apparently the way you play Pokemon Go, the data that it generates about your location is a lot more detailed and granular than these other apps. So again, not having played it, I can't vouch for this for sure, but kind of looking at online reviews, I mean, it's a street-by-street view of your movement. So obviously, any cell phone knows where you live and can kind of look at how you get to work, even if you have the GPS turned off. It can triangulate your position based on cell phone towers. But I mean, this is really kind of being able to capture, you know, how quickly you get there, what routes you take, and one can only imagine the kind of social engineering that's possible with this if they decide to send a bunch of people to a particular place or have a Pokemon battle at this particular house. It's fairly frightening, especially I would imagine if you have young kids, sort of sending them out there and having them follow this stuff on their phone. You don't know where they go. I mean, it's, I think, fairly dangerous. And if it is true that you can challenge someone to a battle somewhere, and then you see somehow on the phone that they get there and they rob you at gunpoint or worse, horrendously dangerous. I mean, even if you're an adult and you're in a city, and certain cities in this country, you take a wrong turn and you find yourself in a pretty bad situation. So I am very wary of that. But it makes you wonder what is behind this. What are they actually looking for when they collect all of this data? Now, I guess another issue is exactly where does this go? I'm guessing now that people are traveling around their cities and towns. Are they eventually going to have to get to different cities in the country. I mean, on the one hand, it's very unique that people can get out and explore their areas, but I just suspect that in the wrong hands, with the wrong intentions, this can really be used as a powerful spying device. And in this Vice piece, and this really stuck with me, they were interviewing Edward Snowden, and he said, whether or not you're threatened by this kind of surveillance today, it provides politicians and people in power with the opportunity for a, quote, turnkey tyranny. So it may not matter today that you're sort of going around your neighborhood and your motions and your use of this app are being tracked, but if you're agreeing to having Pokemon, the Pokemon Company or Nintendo or whatever, turn over information to stop illegal, unethical, or legally actionable activity, and you have a tyrant in office, who's going to determine what is unethical? And obviously, if you're in the United States, certain communities believe things are unethical, whereas they're completely normal in other communities. So I find it disturbing that this is the path Nintendo has gone down. I feel that Nintendo is using its properties, and they're such powerful, almost unifying intellectual properties that make gamers old and young kind of feel good, and they're using them as a vector to deliver surveillance, a kind of very deep-seated and all-encompassing surveillance beyond, it would seem, things like Google or Facebook, simply because, and now this is coming from an adult's position, I choose not to use Facebook. I don't do a lot with Google outside of Gmail, and that's probably enough for the secret police to come knocking at my door if we have a regime change or something. But I feel like for a lot of people it was like, oh, Nintendo, okay, yeah, why I trust this company. And I felt that way with Miitomo. I downloaded it without even thinking. It was like, hey, it's Nintendo's first mobile game. Of course I'm going to download it. And then as I kind of played it for a little bit and realized that I'm shocked the Nintendo company would do this. Don't forget, this is a company that said maybe 3-4 years ago, or Miyamoto said, that Nintendo sees its products as toys. They're not electronics. They're not services. They're toys that you can come back to again and again and enjoy as you did when you first got them. Pokemon Go and Miitomo were very, very different entities. And I think in all of the kind of excitement and within this growing phenomenon, I think we need to pause and ask ourselves, why has Nintendo gone down this path? What are they doing with this information? And do we want our kids, in the case of Miitomo, to be answering very personal and intimate questions just again and again and again? And do we want their movements tracked at a street-by-street level with Pokemon Go? It may seem like paranoia, but as they say, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you.